Americans are celebrating increased deductions, increased tax credits, and more money in their pocket because of larger refunds. I yield the floor.
Senator from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've come to the floor today as a United States Senator, of course, but also as a former soldier who served in uniform the last time a president rashly sent our men and women into an unjustified war in the Middle East. I spent nearly a year at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, recovering from the injuries I earned in Iraq. And every morning, as I struggled to sit up straight, every time I was rolled into yet another surgery, I made sure to read the poster I had next to my hospital bed. It was a framed copy of the Soldier's Creed, the words that those lucky enough to wear the Army uniform live by. That same framed copy now hangs by my desk here in DC. And as I glanced at it this morning, I realized that there's perhaps no greater proof that Donald Trump never deigned to serve a day in his life than the mockery he makes of the Soldier's Creed's commitments every single day he has been in office. The creed may be associated with the Army, but the sentiments hold true for all of those who wear the uniform of this great nation. Its 13 lines tells us to be disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained, proficient, and to look out for those who look out for us, to look out for one another. Donald Trump is supposed to be our service members' commander-in-chief. The very least we should expect of him is to epitomize the standards that we ask our troops to swear by, to live by. The very least we should expect of the commander-in-chief is to be as competent, disciplined, and professional as the men and women whose very lives hinge on his capacity to lead, on that competence and professionalism we expect to see in the White House. The creed makes clear that our troops will never quit, that they will never leave a fallen comrade behind, yet Cadet Bone Spurs is someone who will always quit. And every hour he orders our service members to remain in unnecessary growing danger, he is proving that Donald Trump does not give a damn about leaving a comrade or so many comrades behind. Every moment that Donald Trump leaves our heroes mired in the muck of this illegal war of choice in Iran, he is showing that he cares more about saving his own face than leading our troops. So I come to the floor today with a simple question. Our military men and women go out there every day and do their jobs, no matter the risk, all on Donald Trump's orders. So I ask you, Mr. President, why the hell can't you do your job too? Why can't you live up to the same level of proficiency as our troops? Look, I'm proud of every mission I completed in Iraq, but I would never, ever wish another endless, needless, unjustified war like the one I served in on anybody else. I wouldn't wish it on the heroes who are packing up their rucks right now, knowing they may never touch American soil again? I wouldn't wish it on their families who are being forced to spend their days anxiously awaiting news from half a world away. And I wouldn't wish it on the American people who want their president to focus on bringing the costs down here at home, not starting new, expensive, taxpayer-funded wars continents away. But Trump either doesn't understand or he simply doesn't care about that. From the moment this conflict began, the president has tried to shroud his incompetence behind the valor of our service members. When asked to justify his illegal actions, Donald Trump's tried to hide his cowardice behind our heroes' courage. He's tried to act as if questioning why we're at war is the same as questioning the skill and bravery of our troops themselves. It isn't. And I'm here to call bullshit on the President of the United States, because I know that our military will always do the best job possible. When given a mission, our service members will say, yes, I will serve. They don't say, why me? They don't ask, will I be safe? No. They dust off their boots, they show up, and they do what's asked of them to the best of their ability every single time after time, tour after tour, no matter the risk, no matter the sacrifice. They will always, always execute their orders to the maximum capability of their professionalism, and they are proud to do it. That isn't the problem. The problem here is that the person who's supposed to be leading them spends more time talking about his Marie Antoinette ballroom than he does sitting in the Situation Room trying to get us out of this war. The problem is the guy who claims to be making America great again looks at the word America and only sees the letters M and E in the middle of it. The problem is that the commander-in-chief not only has no idea what the end state is like for his war of choice, but what the term end state means at all. The problem is that even in the last 2 weeks, the man who is in charge of our nation's nuclear codes has himself gone increasingly nuclear. He's not believing literal war with Iran is enough. He's now gone on to proverbial war with the Vatican, choosing to pick fights with the Pope of all people, the Pope, rather than try to engage in any semblance of real diplomacy to end the conflict in the Middle East. He's threatened to annihilate an entire civilization, terrifying people overseas and here at home who are understandably worried about retaliatory strikes. And now, after one half-assed day of so-called negotiations with Iran, he's whipsawed to the next risky frontier in the region, a dangerous, complex, partial military blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, launching it at our nation's expense with no justification, no explanation, or any real plan of what comes next. His only plan seems to rely on the valor, the willingness to sacrifice, the professionalism of our military men and women. But let me tell you, that is not enough. They need a true commander. But Trump is Trump, and he is actively, unabashedly telling us how to ignore what we are all seeing with our own eyes. He's trying to declare mission accomplished despite his obvious failures at every single turn. He's declaring, and I quote, "We did it, we're winning," after all signs point to the opposite. We're still at war. Americans are still at risk. Civilians across the region are still dying for no reason that anyone can truly articulate. In reality, the only thing that Donald Trump has accomplished over the last 6 weeks is more chaos. Because of his choices, a new younger Ayatollah is in charge who seems even more radical than his father was. 13 American heroes have been killed, with hundreds more wounded. More Gold Star parents are grieving their children. And more American families are struggling to afford the spiking gas prices. They're unsure if they can pay even more every time they go to the gas station. But they have to, because they need to get to work. They've got to take their kids to school. They've got to take their aging parents to the doctor. The farmers of Illinois, the farmers of this great nation, have seen at the time that we should be planting, their inputs costs skyrocket because of Donald Trump's war of choice. Look, war is always tragic, but when it's preventable, when it's unjustified, it's not just tragic, it's a travesty. Trump wouldn't let himself be dragged in by the bone spurs to serve in Vietnam. So how dare he drag our nation into a war of his choice today? But this draft dodger, this 5-time draft dodger, is too infatuated with maximum pressure to make a serious effort at even minimum diplomacy. Once again, the Trump foreign policy doctrine has proven reckless, senseless, and dangerous. A doctrine in which fact and fiction are one and the same, one in which our commander-in-chief seems to come to military decisions by virtue of temper tantrums and announces them via tweet in the middle of the night, and one in which avarice outweighs advice every single time. Look, unlike Trump, I actually know what it's like to leave your blood soaking into the desert sand a half a world away. So I know what it's like. I know what it's like and what is at stake for the troops this administration is sending into harm's way. We must safeguard their valor and their professionalism by doing our jobs. I can tell you this, it's a whole lot easier to cover your eyes and order other Americans to sacrifice their children and sacrifice themselves if you don't have to do any of the sacrificing yourself. It's easier to send other people's children to fight in a war if you know your own children are cozy in a penthouse suite somewhere. It's easier to ignore the everyday realities of war from inside the hallowed halls of the White House. We've got McDonald's being DoorDash to the Oval Office. But it's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible if you've been actually outside the wire yourself. So I've come to the floor today to keep true a promise I first made over 2 decades ago. I ran for Congress, not because I wanted to be in Congress, not because I wanted to be a congressman or a senator. I ran for Congress to honor the men and women who carried me out of that bloody war zone. I made a promise that when the drums of war started beating again, I would be in a position to make sure that our elected officials fully consider the true cause of war, not just in terms of money, but in human lives and in the sacrifices of the men and women who wear the colors of this great nation. That was the vow I made to the troops I deployed with and to all of those who've served since I've hung up my uniform. I'm here today under this great Capitol dome to keep that most sacred oath, because right now, thousands of our troops are ready to do their jobs, even if it means laying down their lives. And it's tragic, it's disgusting to me that even as they prepare to do their jobs, our president and some members of this chamber seem so eager to neglect their own. So as those drums of war echo louder than they have ever in years, I am here to remind Donald Trump that he does not have the authority to unilaterally force us into war. He may never have read the Constitution, but I have. So let me direct his attention to Article 1, which makes clear that only Congress has the power to declare war. We are the ones tasked with deciding when and how Americans are sent into combat. We are the ones charged with that most solemn duty. Yet Trump is acting as if Article 1 simply doesn't exist, as if obeying the Constitution is optional, as if our founding document is just a yellowing, crumbling piece of paper that he can crumble up and toss into the garbage can at will. This should not, must not be a partisan issue. No matter if you're struggling to pay rent, or if your name is plastered in fake gold on a building on Fifth Avenue, no one can ignore the Constitution, especially if you've sworn an oath to defend it. No matter if you're a Mar-a-Lago worker pulling down double shifts of the President of the United States, no one is above the law. Look, I believe fully that that there are certain solemn, urgent times when our military must be called upon to defend us. There are certain moments when the threat in question is significant and imminent, instances when military force is the most effective tool at hand, and that using it is necessary to protect America and her interests. The thing is, from what little information the Trump administration has shared publicly that he hasn't immediately contradicted, and sometimes the same sentence, this was not one of those times. But if the administration thinks that I'm wrong and there was imminent, reasonable, actual threat to America, then guess what? The floor is theirs. Come to the Senate, which is 20 minutes from the White House. It's not hard to find. It's even faster in your motorcade, Mr. President. It's not hard to find us. We're the building with the big dome on top. We're only a 20-minute walk. Trump knows where the Capitol building is. It's a spot he told the insurrectionists to march towards on January 6th. So if his team actually believes that war is unjustified, then they need to come to Congress and do their jobs. Explain their case, giving the American people a say through their elected representatives, the members who sit at every one of these desks in this chamber. They need to respect the American people enough to finally tell them why they're being forced to bear the cost of this conflict, both in dollars and cents and daughters and sons. They need to respect our service members enough to prove why war with Iran is worth more children growing up without their mom or dad. They need to make it clear that they've thought this through and well enough that they can actually articulate what an end state with this war of choice in Iran would even look like. Then, when their case has been made, when the debate here in Congress is completed, then the members of this chamber must vote. It's our duty. Yes, it is our burden. It's the least we can do for those who are willing to sacrifice everything to safeguard this democracy. But if the Trump administration refuses to do that, if they refuse to adhere to the Constitution, well, then it begs the question, what are you hiding? What are you hiding, Mr. President? We already know you're incompetent. What else are you hiding? Look, we've now been at this war of choice, of Trump's choice, for a month and a half. Thousands are dead, grieving, wounded, suffering. Only someone as inept and unfit, someone as callous and cruel as Trump would see this as winning. Only a draft-dodging coward would think that this is the right way to engage in a war. Only a man so unqualified to be commander-in-chief would be proud to keep on risking our heroes' lives without even a concept of a plan for how to get them back home without risking more graves at Arlington. We can't let this chaos continue unchecked. As our troops continue to sacrifice whatever is asked of them, we senators need to do the absolute minimum required of us. That's why this week, I'm calling up my War Powers resolution demanding that the Trump administration finally end this illegal war and to call for some actual public oversight and accountability on behalf of the American people. It'll come to the floor for a vote shortly. So to my Republican colleagues, you have a choice, a simple one, really. You can vote with me to end this conflict and show that you actually care about putting America first, like you claim, or you can vote to put Trump's ego first, proving that when push comes to shove, you care more about protecting Trump's thin skin than the Constitution that you swore to defend. At this point, it's pretty clear. Donald J. Trump will always be more interested in looking out for his own self-interest rather than truly serving American interests. So my question is, if any of my Republican colleagues are actually brave enough to stand up and tell Donald J. Trump, the 5-time draft-dodging coward, enough. Thank you. You have the floor.
President.
Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I rise in support of my colleague's War Powers resolution. I am proud to be a co-sponsor with Senator Duckworth, and I'm very humbled to be here in the chamber and listen to her recount her own experience and her own vow as a member of this body to take the very painful lesson that she absorbed when her future was completely altered by her wartime service and put it to a positive use in trying to protect others like her. Senator Duckworth proves a point that gets proved over and over and over again, that our military serve with distinction and bravery. They serve with professionalism and excellence. But so often, the issue for them is the quality of the civilian decisions about whether they go to war or not. And so often in my lifetime, in Vietnam and Iraq and now in Iran, that brave service was compromised, really betrayed by poor civilian decision-making for improper political reasons rather than careful assessment of what was in America's best interests. I have been asking the question since this war began, have we learned nothing from 25 years of war, unproductive war in the Middle East? And it is pretty apparent to me, having asked that question over and over again, that this administration has not. This administration has not factored in the 14,000 plus deaths in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They've not factored in the more than 65,000 American troops and contractors who were injured. They've not factored in hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths. They've not factored in the fact that the U.S. military engagements did not produce a safer region. They've not factored in the $8 trillion spent during those 25 years. They've acted as if that history is now wiped away and we can engage in a war in the Middle East without reflecting upon these lessons that are written in blood and in the precious resources of our nation. And so I'm not going to ask the question again today, have we learned nothing from 25 years? Because I think the answer to that, sadly, is plain. So let me ask a different question. What have we learned in 45 days of war in Iran? What have we learned? I would argue that we've learned at least three things. War is costly. An unwise war is deeply unpopular. And those who would make diplomacy impossible make war inevitable. I think those are the lessons that the last 45 days have taught us. First, war is costly. As my colleague laid out, 13 members of our armed services, one who lived in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, who had purchased a home, was within a few months of retirement, wanting to retire to that home with his family, have died. And spouses and kids and parents and friends and brothers and sisters are mourning the loss in this unwise and illegal war. Hundreds of our troops have been injured, and stories come out about the depth of those injuries and the lack of planning that left them exposed to the attacks that caused them to be injured. And while I wish it were otherwise, it's likely that there will be more such stories. But there's also the cost in dollars. We're spending, by some estimates, between $1 billion and $2 billion a day. We're expecting to see the president sometime soon send over a new request for a dramatic increase in funding to fund this Iran war. But let me talk about cost in a different way, just cost to everyday Americans' pocketbook. Today is tax day. Today is tax day. President Trump is the taxer in chief. Last year, he imposed chaotic tariffs on the world's economy right before tax day. And those tariffs cost American families a couple of $1,000s each. This one-man tariff war that President Trump started without congressional authority, that was ultimately, in significant part, struck down as illegal by the Supreme Court in February of this year. Last year, right before tax day, President Trump stood up and showed by his actions that he's the taxer in chief. And this year, on tax day, we are seeing Americans pay more for food, pay more for energy, pay more for building supplies because of the actions of this president. In particular, just the price of gas at the gas pump. In Virginia and nationally, the price of gas has gone up $1 a gallon since February 27th, just because of President Trump's unilateral decision to take us to war. Virginians buy 8 million gallons of gas a day. So that's $8 million Virginians are having to shell out of their pocket that they weren't having to shell out because Donald Trump started this war. This is happening in Illinois, it's happening in Connecticut, it's happening in Nebraska, it's happening in every state, and it's happening all over the world. We're reading about economies that are shutting down one day a week. We're reading about street protests in allied nations over the cost of petroleum, all driven by this one man deciding to take us to war. So the first lesson from the last 45 days, war is costly. The second lesson is an unwise war is deeply unpopular. This war is deeply unpopular with the American public. Most of us took the last 2 weeks of recess to travel around our states. I represent Virginia, which I believe is one of the most pro-military states in the country. I spent significant time in the Hampton Roads area, the center of American naval power, where we build ships and subs, biggest Navy base in the world. And I spent a lot of time with Virginians over the last 2 weeks. This war is unpopular. Virginians are deployed and they don't know why. And they don't know when they'll come home. The USS Ford carrier today passes the record for the longest deployment of a carrier in American modern history. They were supposed to be home with their families before Christmas, and they are still deployed away from their families with significant maintenance issues, reducing quality of life on that ship. This war is unpopular. But of course it's unpopular. If you go to war without a clear rationale, and the president has floated 5 or 6 of them, if you go to war without a clear plan, without apparently anticipating what everyone would have anticipated, the closure of the Straits of Hormuz, if you go to war without allies, if you go to war without Congress, the war will be unpopular. No plan, no rationale, no allies, no congressional debate. The war will be unpopular. This was so easy to predict at the beginning. For some reason, the president thought the magic of his own personality could turn a war of choice into something that would be embraced by the American public. The American public is too smart for that. And so an unwise war is deeply unpopular. That's a lesson of the last 45 days. And then the last lesson, I believe, is a profound one that we have to acknowledge, and that is this: those who make diplomacy impossible make war inevitable. The president, the vice president, his UN representative, even within the last 2 hours in a hearing before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said the war was necessary to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. There was no intelligence that said that Iran was near getting a nuclear weapon. But if what President Trump wanted to do was to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, then he committed one of the most egregious blunders in the history of the United States in his first term, when he tore up a diplomatic deal that did precisely that. The United States and our European allies and adversaries, China and Russia, engaged in a 20-month negotiation with Iran that led to an agreement. And on the first page of the agreement, page 1, Iran reaffirms that it will never seek to purchase or develop any nuclear weapons. We had the agreement with Iran for no nuclear weapons. We had mechanisms of inspection. We had limitations on centrifuges and limitations on the enrichment of plutonium or uranium. We had a diplomatic deal, and the president tore it up. The deal was working according to our allies. The deal was working according to President Trump's first Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, who urged him to stay in it. The deal was working according to the International Atomic Energy Agency that was investigating and inspecting Iranian facilities. But President Trump took a deal that guaranteed no nuclear weapons ever, and he tore it up. The U.S. doesn't walk away from diplomatic deals. Other nations do that, but the president established a dangerous precedent. And many of us said to him at the time, if you tear up a diplomatic deal, you are paving the path to war. It might be soon or it might not be soon, but you are paving a path to war. If you make diplomacy impossible, you make war inevitable. And that's exactly what Donald Trump has done. Those troops who have died, they've died because Donald Trump tore up a diplomatic deal. The costs that are being experienced by American consumers, we are suffering those costs because Donald Trump tore up a diplomatic deal. The injuries to civilians, to school children, the injuries to American troops, Those are occurring because Donald Trump tore up a diplomatic deal. We still have a seal that is available right here on the walls of the Senate that has the eagle representing the United States, and in each claw holding the arrows of war or the laurel branches of peace. And the seal of the United States always has the eagle looking to the laurel branches. We're supposed to prefer diplomacy first. But Donald Trump has decided that a Department of Defense now needs to be a Department of War. And rules of engagement to protect civilians now can be dismissed and called stupid and things that we don't need to follow. I hope this body still believes that America should prefer diplomacy first. I hope this body still believes in the U.S. being a values-based nation, not a bully nation. That's what this vote is about. And that's why I'm so proud to join my colleague to support it. And I will continue to be on the floor with my colleagues every week until we stop an illegal and unwise war. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am here on the floor to add my support to the resolution being brought before us by Senator Duckworth. This is the third week in a row that we are having an opportunity on the Senate floor to have a short debate and a vote on the most significant military engagement in the Middle East in many of our Senate careers. We are now a month and a half into this bungled, mismanaged war, and we have yet to have a single hearing in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee or the Senate Armed Services Committee on this war, on this military operation. In the absence of these privileged motions that we are bringing, and I'm thankful to Senator Duckworth for bringing one this week, we would have no debate, no vote on the floor on the authorization of war, maybe the most sacred charge we are given as United States senators. We should not normalize that. We should not fail to note how extraordinary it is that our Senate Republican leadership has declined to do any oversight of a war that is costing billions of dollars every week, that has already led to the loss of over a dozen American lives, that has erupted a regional war throughout the Middle East and is literally melting down economies all over the world, especially in the developing world. Not a single hearing in the United States Senate. Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth have not come to the Senate to explain what their plan is, what their strategy is, what their end game is, and I think we know the answer. They simply can't explain what is happening. They can't articulate a strategy. They are not ready to answer questions from Democrats or from Republicans who I think increasingly are starting to scratch their heads about how on earth this is in the U.S. national security interests. Very quickly, because I know we have a number of other colleagues who want to speak, let me just talk about what has happened since we last had an opportunity to vote. First, the impact on the U.S. economy is getting more acute. There are more and more Americans who are unable to make their lives work because we've seen a 30% increase in gas prices since this war began. Farmers have seen a 35% increase in fertilizer, a 50% increase in diesel costs. That increase in agricultural costs is going to almost immediately spill over into big increases at the grocery store. And so amidst high inflation, you are now going to see costs just become prohibitive for a lot of American families. 30% higher gasoline costs simply because of this war of choice. An agricultural economy which was already in crisis. 60% of farmers had already said that they were in a worse financial shape this year prior to the war than when President Trump came into office. Now that gets even worse. What's the impact on our national security? Well, the president has said that there are a bunch of different meandering explanations and objectives for this war. He said that we want to destroy their missile program. Well, what have we found out in the last 2 weeks? We found out that we have come nowhere close to destroying their missile program. In fact, they still likely have the majority of their missiles. And during the ceasefire, Iran has used that time to rehabilitate and rescue many of the missiles and the launchers that were buried in rubble. China stands ready as soon as the bombing fully ceases to help them immediately rebuild their missile program. There is no way this campaign is going to eliminate their missile program. Just the same, we were told that part of the objective of this war was to eliminate their nuclear program. And yet, a month and a half later, they still have all of their enriched uranium. We have not destroyed Iran's knowledge of how to produce a nuclear weapon out of existence, because neither are possible through a bombing campaign alone. Sometimes regime change is an objective, sometimes it isn't. The president said, well, we were gone last week, that in fact, we've already achieved regime change. Well, technically, there is a new Ayatollah, but there is absolutely no evidence that this new Ayatollah, that this new crowd of elite leadership, mainly coming out of the hardline IRGC, is any less provocative, any less dangerous, any less adversarial to U.S. interests. In fact, the opposite is probably true. A doddering 90-year-old Ayatollah was replaced by a group of leaders that are likely much more fanatical and probably much more effective in their aims to try to attack U.S. interests there and around the world. Of course, one of our objectives is a new objective, the objective to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The strait was open before this war began. It is now closed. It is unclear whether President Trump knew that they would close the strait and just threw up his hands, didn't care about the impact on the U.S. economy, or whether he didn't know, which would be egregious in and of itself, and was shocked to find out that Iran would close the strait. We are now a month and a half into this war. The strait is still closed. The president is trying to reopen the strait by blockading it, which is a very strange strategy, one that in day 2 of this new plan does not seem to be succeeding. Finally, what's the impact on the world? And I just want to touch on this very shortly. A new war is erupting in the Middle East. Hezbollah was empowered by the attacks, and there is a prospect of a massive new ground invasion of Lebanon from Israel. Already, hundreds have died in that conflict. Last weekend, you likely saw images of just vicious bombings of what looked to be civilian infrastructure happening inside Lebanon. But a new war in the Middle East between Israel and Lebanon, in which thousands will likely die, in which millions will be displaced. That's horrible for U.S. interests, for our allies' interests. The region is exploding in violence, but even more cataclysmic in its scope is what's happening to developing nations. Developing nations' economies are literally melting down right now, because a 30% increase in fuel costs for a short period of time is something that wouldn't tank the entirety of the American economy, even though it does great damage to individual families. But in nations where a short-term fuel shortage or a 30% immediate spike is something that a government or a very poor population cannot manage, has caused a lot of these countries' economies to simply melt down. These governments are now closing their public operations. Universities in some developing nations are permanently closed because they can't afford to keep the lights on. There is a rolling disaster happening throughout the world because of these energy price increases that have been designed, manufactured by Donald Trump. So it's not just that the Middle East is exploding. It's not just that we aren't meeting any of our objectives in Iran. It's not just that American consumers are being harmed. There are billions of poor people all around the world whose lives are more miserable, whose lives are slipping into greater chaos because of this war. So we will be down on this floor week after week, every single week, to force at least a short debate, to force a vote. And my hope is that at some point our Republican colleagues, besides one, choose to join us. It is okay for you to support President Trump generally and politically and admit that this war was a massive mistake. We did that when there were Democratic presidents in office. President Obama helped participate in a war in the Middle East, helping the Saudis be involved in a conflict in Yemen. Many of us thought that was a mistake. We came to the floor and opposed President Trump. We actually filed resolutions making it harder for President Obama, making it harder on President Obama to fuel that war. And so I hope at some point our Republican colleagues decide that they can choose to just say what is clear and obvious. This war was a mistake. It should end as quickly as possible, and not believe that that is somehow incommensurate with their broader political support for the president. You can, as a United States senator, occasionally stand up to the leader of your party if it's a matter of right and wrong. I believe this is a matter of right and wrong. Maybe it won't be in today's vote, but hopefully in one of the votes we will continue to have, we can have some bipartisan agreement that this war needs to end. I yield the floor.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to salute Senator Duckworth for bringing this critical issue to the floor so that the American people can hear what our views are on this war, but also reflect their views. And I also want to salute here for heroic service in the United States Army. Thank you, Senator. Mr. President, I rise today to discuss the war in Iran. 46 days ago, President Trump unilaterally launched this war. He declined to make his case before the American people. He refused to consult Congress. He failed to present evidence of an imminent threat, and he ignored his advisors who warned him about the perils of such an operation. President Trump believed he alone had the judgment to engage our nation in a major conflict, and he alone had the ability to secure a quick, complete victory. After more than 6 weeks of war, what has the president accomplished? 13 American service members have tragically lost their lives. More than 300 have been wounded. Thousands of civilians across the Middle East have been killed and injured, and hundreds of thousands displaced. The United States has lost dozens of aircraft, sustained significant damage to our bases, and burned through an alarming amount of our missile inventory and other munitions. Global oil prices have surged more than 45%, and the cost of gasoline and household goods in our communities have risen significantly. American families are bearing the cost of a war they wanted nothing to do with and have gained nothing from. In sum, the president took a difficult status quo and somehow managed to make it far worse. On February 27th, the Strait of Hormuz was open to maritime traffic. American farmers could count on fertilizer shipments. Our high-tech ship makers, in whom we've invested billions of dollars, could count on helium deliveries. Today, the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Incredibly, it is now President Trump who is blockading the strait rather than the Iranians. This is a bizarre and incoherent strategy. A blockade will push prices even higher, with ripple effects on food, fuel, and consumer goods across this country, indeed across the world. Additionally, Iran has demonstrated that it responds to military pressure with defiance, not concession. This blockade is unlikely to change Iran's negotiating position, and I worry it will do nothing more than place our service members in greater danger. Only under President Trump's chaotic tenure would a month and a half of fighting result in the United States being in a weaker strategic position than before the war began. Here are the facts. Iran still retains its nuclear program. Its ballistic missile capabilities and drone arsenal, though diminished, still pose a threat. Moreover, the regime has learned it can effectively control the Strait of Hormuz when it chooses. President Trump has badly damaged America's standing with our allies, emboldened our adversaries, and lost any moral authority he had on the international stage. The American people, including many of his own supporters, strongly disapprove of this war. At this stage, we must ask, what comes next? The president has shown he will not listen to military and regional experts and is uninterested in earning the support of the American people. While that is a decision he can make, if he is unconstrained by anything other than his, quote, own morality, then Congress has a duty to constrain him through the powers we hold as the constitutional check and balance on the president. Congress controls the purse. Congress declares war and ratifies treaties. Congress represents and answers to the American people. It is long past time for Republicans to stop avoiding their constitutional duties and start reining in the president's ability to unilaterally wage war. At a bare minimum, it is long past time they hold public hearings with cabinet officials to provide accountability for the American people. Now, I'm relieved that the ceasefire appears to be holding for the moment. The administration should use this time wisely and immediately return to negotiating a diplomatic agreement. That means engaging in serious, structured conversations with Iran to address nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, their proxy activity, but also the sanctions that are in place and the security guarantees that the Iranians will demand. It also means taking a realistic approach to opening the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians have a complex layered network of sea mines, fast attack boats, air and sea drones, missiles, and hidden launch sites in the cliffs around the straits that provide them with many effective options to threaten ships in passage. Even if the United States cleared the Strait of mines and began escorting commercial ships with our own Navy vessels, militarily suppressing and defeating Iran's ambush network is not a sustainable long-term option. A diplomatic arrangement is the only answer. And I must say that to achieve this diplomatic arrangement, the president needs and should announce a group of experts, not real estate developers and golfing buddies, to go over there. This is not going to be settled by the friends of the president cutting a deal. It took us almost 2 years and complicated discussions about nuclear policy, nuclear objectives, et cetera, to get the JCPOA. It's going to take us a while to settle this issue too, and we can't settle it with a casual group negotiating on a weekend. The president said he was shocked that Iran closed the strait and bombarded the Gulf nations in response to his attack. That's rather astounding because everyone with a modest knowledge of the Iranian regime was not particularly shocked. Indeed, the course of this war was entirely predictable. Generations of American military and political experts have examined the Iran problem and repeatedly reached the same conclusion. War with Iran would not achieve our goals. Indeed, President Trump was given the same warning by his advisors. According to press reports, General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, warned the president of becoming entangled in a prolonged conflict and expressed concerns about U.S. casualties and the difficulty caused by a lack of allies. General Kane also reportedly raised the possibility that Iran would block the Strait of Hormuz, stating it was long believed Iran would deploy mines, drones, and missiles to close the world's most vital shipping lane. A separate intelligence official reportedly emphasized, in his words, it wasn't just predictable, it was predicted. He was told in advance. The president ignored this expert advice and decades of historical lessons and attacked anyway. At this juncture, the administration has realized that the Iranians are not going to capitulate and that the difficult work of diplomacy cannot be wrapped up in a mere 21 hours of negotiation. Facing this reality, the president has several options. First, the president could simply declare victory, as he's done so often, and leave the region without a deal. But what would he leave behind? A battered Iran with more antagonistic and radical leaders who may have concluded the only way to avoid future attacks is to acquire a nuclear weapon. With hundreds of pounds of enriched uranium on hand, that possibility is very real and could be accelerated with Russian, Chinese, or North Korean assistance. Second, the president could launch new military strikes to try to force the regime to surrender. However, this would inevitably result in renewed attacks against our forces in the region and a prolonged closure of the strait. And as I mentioned earlier, the regime has already demonstrated that its threshold for pain is high and its regard for its people is low. An extended military campaign would not change essentially the Iranians' negotiating demands. Now, I would propose a third route. The president can resurrect serious negotiations with Iran across the full range of issues dividing our two nations. The agenda must be broad enough for both sides to claim benefit. That's the only way you get to a deal. And we hope the art of the deal is present in this situation. The United States must address nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, and malign proxy activity, and Iran will seek guarantees against further military operations, sanctions relief, and other assurances. President Trump was foolish, in my view, and reflecting Senator Kaine, to tear up the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action he inherited from President Obama. But with careful diplomacy, his administration may be able to regain some of the important pieces that he previously abandoned. But there is an additional obstacle to peace that must be addressed. Prime Minister Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu has spent the better part of 30 years gathering support for what he believed to be an inevitable confrontation with Iran. His personal and political fortunes are entirely aligned with the continuation of this war. As he faces an election and a criminal trial, he is using the war as personal and political armor. Unless Trump is willing to force Netanyahu to stand down, Israel will continue operations regardless of what America does. Mr. President, this war was ill-conceived. I opposed it, and if it is still ongoing after 60 days, I will vote against an authorization of military force to continue it. I'm proud to be here today to vote in support of Senator Duckworth's proposal. From day one, Trump lacked any clear objectives and realistic views of the consequences. But peace can be accomplished. The path forward requires honesty from President Trump about what military force can and cannot achieve, the discipline to negotiate seriously, I'll underline seriously, and the courage to lead our allies rather than alienate them. Unfortunately, this president, I believe, cannot be trusted to chart this path. He has shown an intractable instinct for destruction first and diplomacy last. He will never secure a peaceful conclusion to this conflict as long as Congress allows President Trump to wage war whenever and however he's fit. Yes, we have to stand up and be true to the oath we all took to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this war powers resolution. I urge them to choose the path of peace before the cost of President Trump's war become irreversible. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I rise today because I had conversations with a woman in New Jersey recently that I just can't get out of my head. I was in Atlantic City and I was talking with a woman there about how she felt things were going in our country and for her and her family. What she said really stuck with me, seared into my mind. She said, with everything going on right now, this war and rising costs, she felt like she was drowning. That was the word that she used, drowning. Mr. President, that's the impact that this war is having on the American people. And when someone is drowning, you don't just stand by and wait. You don't hesitate. You don't wait for somebody else to act. You act with urgency, swiftly and decisively. Mr. President, that's what we're trying to do here right now. We're acting by bringing up another war powers resolution to bring an end to this war and give the American people the relief that they need. I know the Trump administration and Republicans here in Congress think that this war is going just fine. Depending on what day it is, Trump either is saying the war is over or threatening to escalate. That's the problem. We are engaged in a war without a clear mission, without taking negotiations to end the war seriously, and without the consultation or buy-in of the American people. It's a war this administration seems to think can go on almost indefinitely. They don't care about the consequences. They are simply posting their way through it on social media. What we've seen from Republicans here in Congress isn't any better. A month and a half into this war, and we have not had a single hearing. A month and a half in. By the way, we haven't had a hearing at all about what happened in Venezuela either. Every one of our offices gets a flood of calls every day from people tired of this war. People who can't afford this war, who can't afford to pay for the decisions that this president made and the Republicans in Congress have stood by and watched like bystanders. Donald Trump, this administration, this Republican Congress, they have all just stood by and watched as the American people feel like they are drowning. If anything, they're making that feeling of extreme anxiety worse. That anxiety is driving our urgency to act. There were a number of reasons why the woman I talked to was feeling that stress and anxiety, and one of them was gas prices. Gas prices were below $3 a gallon in February. In New Jersey, the average price is a little more than $4 a gallon right now, but it's so much higher in some of the biggest population centers. You go around the country, you can find gas for $5, even $6 a gallon right now. And if you're a working parent and you've got to put gas in the tank every single week to get the kids to school, yourself to work, you're paying significantly more at the pump. Ending this war is an urgent matter. It's not just gas for our cars that's driving this urgency. Look at the price of diesel. The average price of diesel, what a lot of trucks that transport goods run on, was $3.72 in February. It's more than $5.80 in New Jersey right now, according to AAA. That means everything you buy, from meat and eggs to coffee and clothes, is getting more expensive because the cost of shipping it costs more than $2 more per gallon than before. Now, if you're a working family looking at your bills, wondering how you're going to make ends meet, ending this war is an urgent matter. Another concern I've heard from so many is the unhinged way that this president has been acting during this war, threatening to destroy a civilization. That's not American. That's not what we do. That's not who we are. I'm proud to represent tens of thousands of service members in New Jersey, hundreds of thousands of veterans, people who are obeying the law, people who are abiding by the principles of our country. But this commander-in-chief is threatening to change that. What we see, what the American people see, when they see a president that's threatening what would be war crimes in the Americans' name, it sends a shock through our consciousness. It sends a clear signal that ending this war is an urgent matter. And that's why we're doing what we're doing right now. Because the American people can't wait for this president to act like a responsible commander-in-chief. They can't wait for this Republican Congress to wake up. They need relief. They need it now, and they deserve it now. I can't go back to that woman in Atlantic City and tell her that she should wait, that we can address her concerns later. And I urge my colleagues to think about the people back home who need help now, and the power we have with this vote to deliver it for them. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution by Senator Duckworth, someone who knows better than any of us the toll that war takes and the urgency needed to stand up for our neighbors. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. President,
The senator from Maryland.
Mr. President, I want to thank my colleague from New Jersey for his powerful words, and I too rise in support of this War Powers resolution put forward by our colleague, Senator Duckworth, who knows a thing or two about the costs of war. And this is a resolution to halt President Trump's unjustified, illegal war against Iran, a war that the overwhelming majority of American people want to see end, a war that this Congress never authorized and where we've never had a hearing from a Trump administration decision maker about the war, a war that was started by President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu that has made us less, not more safe, and a war that has made us much worse off, not better off. Mr. President, we've lost 13 American service members. Hundreds more have been wounded, and thousands of civilians, innocent civilians, have been killed throughout the region. And the sacrifice of our service members deserves more respect than the president casually remarking that, and I quote, "Sadly, there likely will be more. That's the way it is." That's what President Trump said. Well, that's not the way it is, and it's not the way it should be, and it's not the way an American president should talk about our troops. And we must not and cannot normalize President Trump's reckless actions that have brought us to this point. The costs of this war are mounting. We just saw today the president intends to send thousands more troops to the Middle East, 6,000 as part of a naval deployment, and thousands more to come later. This war has already cost us, in addition to lives, $52 billion. $52 billion and another $1 billion every day from the American taxpayers. And on top of that, on top of what taxpayers will be shelling out, we are seeing Americans struggle with rising prices, gas prices, oil prices. And of course, when you have rising gas and oil prices, it drives up prices on everything else like fertilizers that our farmers need as we go into the season of growing. And all this coming from the president who promised that he would focus on lowering prices and ending wars. He promised the American people he'd be, quote, a peacemaker, and he is a warmonger. He lied, and because of his lies, people are dying. And now the president wants to put even more lives at risk to open the Strait of Hormuz. And we should all remind our fellow Americans that the Strait of Hormuz was open before the president started this war. It was open before the president started this war, and now the president's main goal is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The president also said the other day that we achieved regime change. He just didn't tell the American people that when he knocked off some of the top Iranian leaders, the Ayatollahs, they were replaced by an even more militant and even more radical regime. That's the president's definition of regime change. Now, the president likes to claim periodically that we won. In fact, more than 3 weeks ago, the president of the United States said, quote, "We won. The United States won." He said that a few days ago. The president said, "We won." My question for my Republican colleagues is, if we won, what the hell are we still doing there? We won, why are we still there? Why are we still putting American lives at risk? Why are we spending $1 billion of taxpayer money a day if we won? Well, we didn't win, and it's impossible to measure how you win because the president never set forth clear rationales for this war, because there wasn't really one to be had, and certainly they've advanced no end game. Like, what does it mean for him to win the war that he already said that he won? So we know from the president's own words that there's no clear end game here. And it's clear every day that this war is not in the interests of the American people. Now, we've seen from President Trump not strength or leadership. What we've seen is recklessness. And now we in the Senate should apply some brakes and accountability. We've seen a president threatening massive war crimes in the name of the American people, threatening to end a civilization. Colleagues, this is a time for sober and serious American leadership. And Donald Trump is not a serious leader. In addition to threatening to end a civilization, he has attacked the Pope because the Pope seeks peace. He has posted an image of himself as Jesus Christ. This is the man in the White House who is running this war. He is putting American lives at risk and endangering people throughout the world, and he's simply not fit to be commander-in-chief. And so all of this without the consent of the American people. That's where Congress is supposed to come in. And so, Mr. President, when you're looking at a president of the United States who's so unhinged, how is it that we can only find one Republican senator, Senator Rand Paul? How is it that we can only find one to stand up for the Constitution and against this president who clearly is not following the will of the American people? A president who took us into an illegal war that's making us less safe and worse off. That's our job. That's our job, and this Senate keeps ducking its responsibility. This resolution put forward by Senator Duckworth is another opportunity for our Republican colleagues to show that they're going to exercise their responsibilities under the Constitution of the United States. And we will keep offering war powers resolutions so the American people know that we're working every day to end this war, which they want to see come to a close. Maybe we can begin that process today. I thank Senator Duckworth for offering this resolution and really urge my colleagues to search their souls and talk to their constituents and vote yes. And I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Wisconsin.
I ask unanimous consent that following my remarks, the following senators be permitted to speak prior to the scheduled vote. Senator Schiff for up to 10 minutes, Senator Risch for up to 5 minutes, Senator Duckworth for up to 3 minutes, and Senator Schumer for up to 2 minutes. I rise today to stand with the American people who are demanding that we bring an end to President Trump's war in Iran. It's been over a month since President Trump made the decision to take us to war. And I'd like to take a moment to reflect on what this illegal war has achieved and what it has cost. President Trump's war has delivered higher costs for Americans at the pump. It's jacked up the cost of fertilizer and fuel for Wisconsin farmers. As Americans struggle to afford basic necessities, the Trump administration has spent tens of billions of dollars on a war that Americans did not ask for. We've lost 13 service members, with hundreds of others injured. Thousands of civilians have been killed, including dozens of schoolgirls, by an errant US missile. President Trump has eased sanctions on Russia and showed Iran how to profit from blocking the Strait of Hormuz. The same oppressive regime remains in place. Iran still controls its enriched uranium. And the United States is no closer to a guarantee that Iran will not pursue a nuclear weapon. In short, President Trump's war of choice has accomplished next to nothing at a tremendous cost to the American people. And still, Donald Trump has been unable or unwilling to offer a coherent reason for why we are at war. The American people are looking to Congress to do something. The People's Branch is supposed to be a check on this president. We need to stand up on behalf of our constituents who do not like this war and who want it to end. Americans know the cost of this war. They are the ones who are paying for it. My Republican colleagues have a choice. Do your job. Stand up to this president and send a clear message to Americans by ending this war today. Or live with the consequences as more civilians are killed, more service members are put in harm's way, and more American families struggle to make ends meet. The choice is yours. I yield.
Mr. President.
Senator from California.
Mr. President, we are now in the second month of Trump's Iran war, and we have already tragically lost 13 service members, including one Chief Warrant Officer, Robert Marzan, from my home state of California. We are now in the second month of Trump's Iran war, and more than 200 service members have been injured, some very seriously. We are now in the second month of Trump's Iran war, and we have already had 2 American pilots shot down over Iran, necessitating a rescue under extremely dangerous conditions, a heroic rescue, a daring rescue, and one that was only possible because we have the most capable special forces in the world. But a rescue mission that we must all acknowledge put an incredible number of our service members at grave risk and could have easily gone wrong. We are now in the second month of Trump's Iran war, and we have squandered tens of billions of dollars that could have been used to build hospitals and affordable housing, to build childcare centers and senior centers, at a time when the president says we can't afford daycare or Medicare or Medicaid. We are now in the second month of Trump's Iran war, and Americans are paying astronomical prices at the gas pump, at the grocery store, on their utility bills and medical bills, but the president's actions and inaction are only making life more unaffordable for our citizens. We are now in the second month of Trump's Iran war, and the president has offered no proposal to even authorize the use of force in Iran, nor have Republicans demanded one. We have not had a single open hearing on the war, nor have Republicans called for one. The case for the war in Iran has never been made, will never be made, and my colleagues will not put the matter to a vote for fear they will lose that vote or be held accountable for it. How long can this go on? And the short, terrible answer is for a very long time. It is beginning to have all of the telltale signs of a quagmire. For this war had no clear purpose. It had no well-defined goal. It had no strategic plan. Its rationale has shifted endlessly with the wind and the whims of the president. It has vacillated between being about regime change and then not about regime change, about missiles and then not about missiles, about oil and then not about oil, about Iran's nuclear threat and then not about its nuclear threat, since the president had said the Iran nuclear program had been obliterated a year earlier. Ironically, the administration's nuclear endgame now sounds a lot like the JCPOA, the much maligned agreement that Trump tore up and now seems reconciled to embrace. The JCPOA, or something like it. Iran has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, sending oil prices skyrocketing, and now the vice president says two can play at that game. So we're in the blockade business too. How does that help the American family that can't afford to fill up the car, the trucker put out of work, or the farmer with no fertilizer? The simple truth is that this administration has no idea how or when this war will end. It is hard to end a war when you are not clear on why you began it. We can only be certain of one thing. At some point, the president will claim victory. But what kind of victory will it be? One in which Iran, for the first time, can demand tolls from ships passing through Hormuz? One in which the regime has survived and empowered and embittered, is even worse, with more crackdowns on the Iranian people, even less tolerant of dissent, or worse still, with a fervent desire to break out and build a bomb? One in which we suffer persistent and higher gas prices because of long-term damage that has been done to Gulf oil and gas infrastructure? One in which Russia is richer and will be richer for the foreseeable future from the higher oil prices it can charge so that it can better fund its war with Ukraine? Is this the victory that Trump will declare? One for which we have paid dearly in blood and treasure, one for which we will have cut healthcare by $200 billion more for defense to replenish the stocks of the weapons that he has used? Does that sound like victory? Does that feel like victory? In 1984, at the height of the Cold War, Ronald Reagan said this. He said, "History teaches that wars begin when governments believe the price of aggression is cheap." Sadly, the lessons of that history have come to pass. And they have come to pass in the form of a president who now too often sees aggression as cheap, as he has launched not one but two wars against Iran, as he has launched unilateral strikes in South America and in Africa, as he has overseen a war on vessels in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific, as he's blockaded Cuba and threatens to take it along with Greenland. To Donald Trump, war has become easy. It has become a kind of default. And as a result, he has become the president he promised he would never be. Far from his promise to end wars, he is now the president determined to start them, and lots of them. The Founding Fathers warned us of a man like this, a president grown too fond of war, seduced by the quick success of the apprehension of Maduro in Venezuela and of the access to another country's oil that such an operation begat. He was induced to make war against Iran. But Iran is not Venezuela. And the son of the Ayatollah is no Delcy Rodriguez, not another pliant regime figure to be easily manipulated. In the same speech, Reagan also said this: "To keep the peace, we and our allies must be strong enough to convince any potential aggressor that war can bring no benefit, only disaster." This is peace through strength, his most famous mantra in foreign policy. Well, what is the strength of our alliances now? The president has turned our back on the security pacts that Reagan championed, like NATO. He has failed to consult with our allies before embarking on this war of choice, then claimed we didn't need allies, then complained when our allies did not come to our assistance in reopening a strait that previously had been open, but now was closed. The president has undermined our credibility with friend and foe alike as he threatens to end a civilization or to commit war crimes, or as he's ordered military strikes while talks were ongoing, or as 2 more weeks becomes a kind of punchline. And what have we taught Iran, the ostensible aggressor in Ronald Reagan's formulation? Have we taught Iran that war can bring no benefit? Or is Iran now convinced it can bring the world economy to its knees and impose its will by imposing fees on passage through the Strait of Hormuz? Does it believe that while the US military can pound its Navy and missile sites, it can still strike US targets and our partners in the region with rockets and drones? Does it believe it has an asymmetric advantage over the US because drones and missiles are cheap and interceptors are expensive? Ronald Reagan will be right that we have convinced the aggressor that war can bring no advantage, only disaster, if in fact it is we who are the aggressor. This war should never have begun. And it's long time for the US Congress to put an end to it. I thank you, and I yield back.
Senator from Idaho.
Thank you, Mr. President. I come to the floor today to oppose the resolution we're going to vote on here in just a little bit. I think this is I don't know how many times I've been here on this, but this is the same old again. The resolution isn't very long. It's a few pages long. And really, the operative language is very short. It says, Congress hereby directs the President to remove the United States Armed Forces from hostilities within or against Iran. That's all it says. It says, President Trump, put your tail between your legs and run. That's what this resolution says. Now, let me tell you where we are. First of all, I want to talk to Iran. Iran, nobody is coming to help you. Not the Russians, not the Chinese, not the North Koreans, not Venezuela, not Cuba. Nobody is coming to help you, Iran, except for the 47 people over here. The 47 people on this side of the room are trying to direct the President of the United States, who is defending the United States. They are trying to direct him to remove the armed forces that we have, our brave young men and women who are engaged in these hostilities. They are trying to remove them from these hostilities. These 47 people, nobody else in the world. So to them I say, the President of the United States has not only the right to do this, I know you claim he doesn't, but he has the right to do this. Not only does he have the right to do this, he has the duty to do this. He took an oath to defend the people of the United States of America. How did we get here? 47 years ago, Iran started this conflict. We did not. We did not start a war with Iran. We don't want a war with Iran, but we have to defend ourselves. 47 years ago, they took over our embassy in Tehran and held all of our United States American people who were employed in that embassy for 444 days. Finally, Ronald Reagan was elected president. We got him out. But since that time, Iran has killed thousands, not hundreds, thousands of Americans wherever they can find them. They do them with all kinds of methods, including IEDs, which are deadly. Fortunately, President Trump and Trump 1 took out General Soleimani, who was the godfather of that operation, and that has ratcheted back, but they're still killing them with IEDs. The President of the United States is defending the United States of America. You can pass all the resolutions you want. This president is going to defend this country. Now, I know you say it's illegal. If indeed it is illegal, as you claim it is, you're in the wrong room. You ought to be in the room across the street in the United States Supreme Court. Because if it is illegal, you should sue them and you should stop it. And you're not doing it because you know you're going to lose that case. The President of the United States, under Article 2 of the Constitution, gives the President the authority. He's doing it. This is not going to be a forever war. Indeed, if anything, it's ending what seems like it's been a forever conflict with Iran. So, Mr. President, you're doing the right thing. You've done a great job thus far. This is going to end fairly quickly. Keep up the good work. My friends on this side of the aisle, vote to oppose this resolution. Thank you.
President.
The senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, I just listened to my colleague on the other side of the aisle who raised concerns about my war powers resolution. And I'm disappointed, but not in any way surprised that they continue to carry the president's water on this war. I would welcome the chairman of SFRC scheduling oversight hearings with Secretary Rubio. I mean, as a former member of the committee, the secretary should be used to testifying before the SFRC. He should schedule them because we and the American people are owed actual answers on this administration's conduct, planning, and diplomacy during this war of their own making. And right now, American service members are already in harm's way, 6,000 miles east. These troops are ready to do their jobs, no matter the risk or the sacrifice required of them, just as our brave American troops have always done, time after time and tour after tour. So to me, it's tragic that even as they continue to do their duties, our president and members of Congress from the Republican side of the aisle seem so ready to neglect their own duties. I want a democratic Iran. I want to see its people free from the iron grip of its brutal authoritarian regime, and I'm not about to shed a tear for the previous Ayatollah's death. But that doesn't mean we should not be gravely concerned by the consequences of Trump's actions in his war of choice. Look, I know there are solemn and urgent times when our military must be called upon to defend us. To determine when that is, there are 4 questions we should be asking. 1, is the threat significant? 2, is the threat imminent? 3, is the military the most effective tool for the goal at hand and that there are no other tools that can do the job? And 4, would the military be counterproductive to its most solemn mission of protecting America? With his unconstitutional, unjustified, and unwanted regime change war in the Middle East, Trump has traded deterrence for instability and chaos and made all of us less safe in the process. It's time for us to rein him in. I yield the floor.
The Democratic leader.
First, I want to thank my colleagues, my colleague from Illinois who's done such a good job and knows all about what our veterans go through in the horrors of war. My colleague Tim Kaine, who has been so involved in this issue of war powers resolutions for decades, actually, or a decade, and so many others of us who are introducing resolutions on this issue. Now, Mr. President, Republicans have voted against this resolution 3 times now, But as the war drags on for 47 days with no end in sight, they should join us today on this resolution to end this war once and for all. With gas costs costing over $4 a gallon, with inflation climbing, with mortgage rates going up, the American people literally cannot afford for Republicans to forego another opportunity to work with Democrats to end Trump's disastrous war at long last. Congress cannot simply sit on the sidelines while our brave service members are risking their lives on the front lines. The stakes are too high, the risks are too great for Republicans to stay silent. I urge my Republican colleagues to listen to the majority of Americans who are calling for an end to Trump's wanton war of choice. We still don't know the goals. We still don't know the costs. We still don't know the length of time. So many unanswered questions on the most important issue that this Senate can face, which is whether to go to war, and then total silence from the other side, not a single hearing, not a single discussion on this. Well, I'm going to tell my Republican colleagues, they're not going to be able to escape continuing to vote on this. Until our Republican colleagues join us, we will continue forcing a vote on our war powers resolution week after week after week. This is an American issue, not a partisan one. This is one of the worst forays America has ever made, with so much damage that's going to be lasting. And so, I urge my colleagues to do what they know is the right thing and join us in voting for Senator Duckworth's resolution. I yield the floor. Call for the...
The question is on the motion to discharge. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Mr. Armstrong, Ms. Baldwin.
Aye.
Mr. Banks. No. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Britt. Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Curtis. Mr. Deans. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mr. Fetterman. Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Gallego. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Husted. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Justice. Mr. Kane. Mr. Langford. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lujan. Ms. Lummis. Mr. Markey. Mr. Marshall. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McCormick. Mr. Merkley. Mrs. Moody. Mr. Moran. Mr. Marino. Ms. Markowski. Mr. Murphy. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Ossoff. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Paul. Mr. Peters. Mr. Reed. Mr. Ricketts. Mr. Risch. Ms. Rosen. Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Baldwin, Blumenthal, Cantwell, Coons, Duckworth, Durbin, Hassan, Klobuchar, Markey, Merkley, Murray, Hall, Peters, Reed, Schatz, Schiff, Schumer, Shaheen, Slotkin, Warner, Warnock, Warren, Welch, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Senators voting in the negative: Banks, Blackburn, Britt, Cornyn, Cotton, Curtis, Grassley, Haggerty, Marshall, Risch, Scott of South Carolina, and Tuberville. Mr. Crapo, no. Ms. Smith, aye. Mr. McConnell, no. Ms. Collins, no. Ms. Ernst, no. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Mrs. Capito, no. Mr. McCormick, no. Mr. Husted, no. Mr. Budd, no. Ms. Hirono, aye. Mr. Van Hollen, aye. Mr. Johnson, no. Mr. Daines, no. Mr. Tillis, no. Mr. Schmidt, no. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, no. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Hickenlooper, aye. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mrs. Hyde-Smith, no. Mr. Sheehy. Mr. Sheehy, no. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman, no. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, no. Ms. Lummis, no. Mr. Wicker, no. Mr. Heinrich, aye. Mr. Fetterman, no. Mr. Lujan, aye. Mr. Padilla, aye. Mr. Langford, no. Ms. Cortez Masto. Ms. Cortez Masto, aye. Ms. Rosen. Ms. Rosen, aye. Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy, no. Mrs. Moody. Mrs. Moody, no. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Blunt Rochester, aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott of Florida, no. Mr. Gallego. Mr. Gallego, aye. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Booker. Mr. Booker, aye. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Hawley, no. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, no. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, aye. Mr. Thune, no.
The senator from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm back again, talking about something that is very, very important to everybody in the United States of America. There should be alarms going off about what's happening. I know we have a lot of bad things happening all over the world. We're in conflicts. We're in situations where we're trying to control our own destiny when we're not getting a lot of help from a lot of people that we should be counting on. But let's talk about the United States of America for a second. And let's talk about our farmers. Our farmers are in trouble. We better wake up and smell the roses, because what's happening in this country should be a crime. We have lost, just in the last few years, 150,000 farms and over 25,000 farmers. 150,000. And we take pride in what we do in this country. We do everything as first class we possibly can. And we're running people out of business right and left, and it's getting worse. Nobody's listening. Nobody's out there pounding on all of our doors saying we need help, other than the ones right now that are in desperate and dire need. Again, we have a lot of problems, but you think we have problems. We start and continue to lose these farmers that we have in this country, and we continue to eat the trash that is sent in from these foreign countries, we're going to have many, many more problems. It's a big deal because there's not one state in this country that doesn't deal in farming in some capacity. Not one state. We're all involved in it. We all have skin in the game. Agriculture is the backbone of who we are and what we are. And if we're going to continue to be the place that everybody wants to move to be a part of, and not a third world country like a lot of these places that we're allowing to ship food in from, we'd better wake up. You know, for some reason, the past administration either didn't understand the importance of agriculture or our farmers, or put it bluntly, they really did they even give a damn about it, to be honest with you. Instead, they were focused on outsourcing our food, our lumber, our fish, anything to do with farming or agriculture. We, for some reason, were turning over everything to people outside our country. And the people, the cream of the crop that are true Americans in this country, are people in agriculture. You would think that we would learn a thing or two back during COVID. I can remember standing up here at the early part of COVID back in, 2020, and talking about how in the world have we allowed this country to outsource everything that we do medically? Because when we looked up and COVID was rampant, we're looking around for masks, we're looking around for drugs, we're looking around for things to save people's lives. And guess what? We don't make any of that stuff anymore. We outsourced it all. Now we're doing the same thing to farmers. You know, it's very dangerous to be reliant on countries like China, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Brazil, all these people that are either socialist or communist countries. We can't continue to do this. We can't do it. We built this country on hard work and effort, and not by handouts and not by cheap things that we buy to keep this country going, such as what's coming from China or some of these third world countries. One thing that we need to be doing to help our farmers is we need to be tariffing the heck out of these countries that are sending in food that's taken over our grocery stores and our restaurants that they say is great food. It is reliable. It is the best in the world, when it is nothing but trash. That's all it is. It's total trash. And for some reason, because we think that the price is a little bit better, we're getting involved in that in terms of our grocery stores and our restaurants, and we're serving things that we shouldn't be serving. And it's causing a lot more problems. You know, we've got the best food safety programs and standards in this country by far. We got to know where it was raised. We have to know what been sprayed on the food or where the fish was caught. All the things that go along with food safety go along with farming. You know, the past few decades, the beef packing industry has shrunk to the point that there's only a few plants processing the majority of our nation's cattle today. And that is beyond stupid. Really, it is. Think of what we've done. We have outsourced most of our food processing, especially when it comes to beef, to these gigantic processing companies that, by the way, are owned, 2 of them, by foreign entities. President Trump did an executive order to try to get to the bottom of what these foreign-owned meatpacking companies were doing because our prices were going so high. They were price fixing. And what do you think is going to happen when you run into a situation where you allow people to control the market? Think about it. These foreign entities are controlling America's meat supply at the expense of American farmers and their families, people that work hard, like all of us in this country. Not to mention that the consolidation of these few processors has threatened Americans' food supply. You know, in 1980, these foreign processors control about 36% of the market, beef market. Think about that. In 1980, they control 36% of the beef market. Now, today, these processing plants, 2 which are foreign-owned, control 85% of the United States beef processing market. And we're asking for huge problems. You know, I'm not a mathematician, but I know that those numbers, that American-owned small meat processors have been pushed out of business. And that's what they've done. That's how they do it. They try to control everything. So they put in these 4 meat packing processing plants across this country. They control it all, and the little guy is gone. And this country was built on small businesses, small farms, everything that produced good product for the United States citizens. That's how we were raised. That's how we were brought up. We need to open up competition and find ways to support American meat processing plants. We've got to do it. We have to do it. I mean, that's the job of our agriculture department. They have started working on that, started trying to open up more, see what we can do, but we cannot continue to allow 4 meat packing processing plants to control everything that we do when it comes to beef. You know, when I was growing up, it was common to see Made in America labels on everything in the store. Made in America. We're all proud of it. Now it's rare. Most of the labels we say are made in China or made in India. I want to challenge everybody to, when you go in the store, you think that this product is made in America. All you have to do is look at the box or the can or whatever. You'll be very, very surprised where that product is made. Very surprised. And most of the time, it's not going to be made in the good old USA. And it's hurting our American farmers. It is hurting us bad. They can put a name on it, they can put a label on it, but that doesn't mean a hill of beans. Unless it says made in America, we're selling our country out. We're selling our farmers out, people that have built this country. In addition to growing our own food and producing our own medicine, we need to be using our own cotton. I want you to think about this. Our cotton farmers are broke. They've had 3 bad years, and it's getting worse and worse every year. Now this is planting season. They're putting all the cotton in the ground. They're putting fertilizer. They've got all these people out there working these hundreds of $1,000 tractors and machines that they use to plant this cotton. And if you look at it at the end of the day, the cost of putting this cotton in the ground is far and above the amount of money that they'll receive when they sell this cotton. Used to, that didn't happen. Used to, we were not challenged as much. But what have we done? we've allowed foreign countries to do everything they possibly can to outgrow and do things at a rate faster than us. And then we're allowing all this cotton to come in from other countries. Brazil is one. And again, if we continue to allow Brazil without tariffing these people and let them know, hey, you're going to send your cotton in here, we're going to have a tough time and we're going to lose our farmers. So we're going to start tariffing your cotton and put a price tag on it when it comes to this country. We do not owe Brazil one thing. Our farmers don't owe them anything. We owe our farmers in this country. You know, in my state of Alabama, we're one of the top cotton producers in the country. We bring in more than $400 million of revenue every year to the state of Alabama. You know, our stores are filled with shirts, jeans, towels, bedding. But the problem is, you look on that tag, most of them are made overseas. Everything with cotton. I mean, we don't really use cotton in this country anymore unless it comes from overseas. American cotton farmers produce the highest quality of cotton in the world. I mean, but they're undercut by all this foreign junk that we're bringing in. So there's a lot of work that goes into cotton production. And one thing about our cotton farmers, they work at it 365 days a year. They make the best product they possibly can. But unfortunately, we're held to a standard that a lot of people and a lot of things that go on, in, whether it's textile mills or people that are involved in the cotton business, use the foreign cotton. And we don't use near as much in our country. So my point here is that Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi and I, we're introducing a bill called Buying America Cotton Act. Now here's the reason we're doing this. We have to save our cotton farmers. If we don't do it, in the next few years, it'll be over. They'll all be gone. And every American in this country, when you buy something with cotton in it, that cotton is going to come from a foreign entity. We have to do something to help them. And there's a way to do it without costing a lot of money. There's a way to do it in this building. All we have to do is pass the Buying America Cotton Act to incentivize folks to buy American cotton and bolster our American cotton producers. Instead of arguing about bailouts when our cotton farmers go under, you know, and they need help. Of course, we always, as federal government, we try to help them out, but you can't help them out enough to where they can really survive in a long period of time. So what we want to do is get away from the subsidy part and give them an opportunity through Buying American Cotton Act to give tax credits when people buy American cotton. That's all we want to do. When people buy American cotton, they get a tax credit for it. If you buy Brazilian cotton, you don't get a tax credit. We have to do something to help our farmers, especially these cotton farmers. You know, when farm income improves, everything else improves. The net program goes down, not to mention the additional economic activity that a strong rural economy will contribute to when you get this tax base done with farmers and making profit. Again, they hadn't made any profit going on 4 or 5 years. Instead of spending money, that's the reason we did this bill. Instead of spending money, we wanted to make sure that these farmers don't need a subsidy at the end of the year. If we give tax credits for farmers or to entities that buy American cotton, we will not have to pay subsidy anymore. This is a end-all solution to helping the cotton farmers across this country. Cotton is not just for T-shirts and stuff either. Cotton is for medical supplies, you know, military, critical materials that we use across this country. Cotton plays a key part in national security.